Hey everybody, today we are going to do some Beat Detective. Beat Detective is Pro Tools' built-in way to slice and dice, automatically find your drum hits, create separations, move them towards the grid or maybe to the grid, and then clean up all those edits that it's done, the chops and the gaps and all of that by creating some crossfades, filling up those gaps. And so it works great for things with strong transients like drums, things that need to stay phase coherent, like multi-tracked instruments, like drums. But it can also work on a few other things. It works great on percussion, because they're like drums. Works okay on certain short instruments, like pizzicato strings or something like that. Not going to be great for things that have long tones, like guitars, piano, vocal. It's not really meant for that. It's meant for things that have shorter hits, strong transients that it can find quickly and easily, and it can save you hours and hours of your life by automating a lot of the processes that you might have to normally seek and break and nudge and manually crossfade all sorts of stuff. So I'm going to basically be walking through the process that we use for, let me pull it up, for this drum walkthrough or Beat Detective walkthrough that's in the Dark Horse resource book. So feel free to grab that. You will see all this same information in here, just without reading. So that'll be nice. So let's get into it, and I'll show you, basically my idea or my workflow through this. There are a couple ways to do this, and as long as you get to the other end of it and everything's in time and you can't hear all the editing, then you've done a good job. You will notice that the problems you hear later are going to be different than the problems you hear when you first get started. So expect that you might be kind of missing something. And, engineers should always be using their ears. But in the case of Pro Tools and doing some of these edits, your ears can be definitely assisted by using your eyes as well. So you'll be paying close attention. So here is a drum track, and it's a good track, well played. You can see some punches where we replace things. And as we get near the end, maybe it's over here. Getting pretty busy. So there's a lot going on in there, and we'll sort through it as we go. With all these edits in there, it's going to be really important that before you get started, you clean up those edits by hand. So through the tracking process, I'm sure, and setting up your Pro Tools session, you've already got track groups. Kick, snare, toms, drums are the ones I always do, and in that order, so I can remember them. When I'm in the mix window, I can just hit A, B, C, D and turn those on and off. But throughout everything we do today, we are keeping the drum group on. And the reason for that is all of these samples, or all of these hits, have bleed. So every snare hit doesn't just show up on the snare track, it also shows up on the overheads and the rooms and in the kick mic and the toms. It's all everywhere. So it's going to be really important that those all stay in phase with each other, because we already put the effort in during tracking to make them line up. So every edit we do should be to all of the drums. We're not going to be going in and time aligning the kick and then time aligning the snare, because then your overheads and rooms would go all out of phase all the time. So we want to make sure we fix our edits, and remember the fades should always go right before the transient, not right after a transient, because this is the quietest moment of that kick hit, is all the way over here, and it's the best place to hide a fade. Just going to be listening as we go, making sure that's all clean. All right. Easy way to get around on these things when you know you've got big chunks to work through is select a clip and then hit Q or W. Q takes you to the left edge of the clip, W takes you to the right. And I can just trim it up to be right in front of that. Get my crossfade going. I usually use a little pre-fade, about 2 counts typically, or pre-roll, not pre-fade. I usually use about 2 beats of pre-roll. I found that when I'm working on something like this fade and trying to get a position just right, I might need to move it a little bit here and there, and so I'll just select it, but without having to lose it, I'll hit play. It'll play through and keep on going afterwards. I use a long post roll, so it'll just play all the way to the end of the song. But if I select this, I'll hit W, takes me to the right edge of that clip. I can double check that fade, select this one, W. That one was a little far away from the transient, but if I move it over, right in there, you're gonna see that double transient show up. And if I keep going, you'd get 1 take of that snare hit. If I go back this way, you get both, and then you only have 1. So let's make sure this sounds clean. Now I can hear those cymbals dropping out just a little bit. Let's try it over here and see if that works better. I'm hearing cymbals moving. That sounded pretty good. And you can see already, these are not exactly on time. That is about 20 milliseconds early, which is definitely a noticeable amount of time in a groove when everybody else is locked in tight. You would notice if the drums were, especially a big snare hit, coming in early. Select that, hit W. Here's a little bit of an exception. I said we're always going to edit everything together. I wanted to get in and just replace a bad snare mic glitch. And so I grabbed probably a better snare hit, pasted it exactly lined up with the old one. And you see if I move that, those waves started exactly the same time so that it'll stay in phase. And that worked. So do what I say, not what I do. Sounded clean. Checking this guy. Getting a little blast beady. All right, and we go all the way to the end. I'm going to leave all this ending on there, and at the beginning, I'm going to leave that on there for now, because I'm going to chop it off here in the next stage. Okay, so now my tracks are basically just cleaned up where they should have been at the end of the tracking session, but you don't always have time. It's going to be really important as you dive into all of your editing tasks, which is why I have it highlighted here. Always want to duplicate your playlist and do a save as. So I've already saved this session as something new, so I'm not going to risk writing over my old session. We're going to end up with like lots of Pro Tools sessions named, you know, tracking, editing, vocal comp, mixing, whatever it's going to be called. And so I often have one that just says like the song name _ BD for Beat Detective. And I'm going to duplicate the playlist as well. So I have a drum group. I don't need to press any shortcuts. Just go to duplicate playlist and it gives me a new one. Or if I want, Control /, the one below the delete and above return, gives you a new playlist. Control Command / would give you duplicate playlist. And then I'm going to rename all of these so I know what playlist 10 is. So if you right click, batch rename, find 10 and rename as BD for Beat Detective. And now I have a playlist. My original was named 9 and I have a new one named BD. Shift up and down if you want to switch playlists, by the way. Now that I have that ready to go, I'm going to, over here are drum samples. Ooh, it's pretty. I don't need that right now. I've got that on another playlist because I did all the right things. So now that I've got those together, Beat Detective will get confused by edits like these in the middle of the track. So I'm going to consolidate, which is Option Shift 3. So now that it's consolidated, I have one big long clip all the way front to back. And I want to make it so I can see my tracks a little bit better. They're all very small and very far away. So We're going to zoom in a little bit, but we're going to find a set of tracks that really tell us the story of the drum performance. So I'm looking for close mics on drums and hi-hat. These will be the clearest transients, and I don't need 4 snare mics. I just need the 1. So I'm going to go with kick in, snare top, hats, and toms. Those are all the close mics. And I'm going to create a group. Command G creates a track group just called BD. And notice that it created a new track group on the bottom left here. If I hit the dot on that, it will select those tracks. If I hit the dot next to drums, it will select all of the drum tracks. Hit the dot next to BD, and it selects just these close mics. This is going to be really important. If that doesn't happen for you, it's because of this button right here, link track and edit selection. That needs to be selected for this system to work. And generally, it's useful anyway. Okay, so now I've got those tracks, and what I'm going to do is make all my drums small, micro or mini, and then shift option, while I've got those, let's see, it's 6 tracks, shift option, fit to window. Clicking on my track height ruler right here, and holding shift option. So those 6 tracks now fill my window. And I can make a few things smaller. It's always helpful. And kind of make some more real estate for myself. And then shift option scroll is giving me the ability to change my waveform height. So I want my kicks and snares to kind of fill the track, but not necessarily overrun the track. And then I'm going to be zooming in and out all day. RR, TT, whatever. You can use command left and right bracket and watch my shortcuts up in the top right, and you'll see which ones I'm using at any given moment. Okay, command 8 on the number pad. You need a number pad to do that. Otherwise, you have to go up to Event, Beat Detective. And that would be terrible. So command 8 brings up the Beat Detective window. And in this window, we have all the things that Beat Detective can do. The first 2 options on the operations of the left side, we are not going to be using. You may eventually use them for something, but as far as what we're doing today, which is just time aligning drums, no thank you. But bar and beat marker generation, instead of moving drums to a grid, bar and beat marker generation moves a grid to drums. And so if you have a drummer that sounds and feels great, but is kind of drifting around the tempo, but you want to leave it that way, you can use this tool to make the grid match the drummer. Then groove template extraction. There are a lot of grooves, and we'll talk about swing in a little while. A lot of grooves that are kind of unique. They're not straight on an 8th note or a 16th note or even a triplet. They may be somewhere in between all those things. And so a groove template is allowing you to kind of measure and map what a particular drummer does. So you could steal the feel of, some famous drummer and map this in as a groove template, and then it will give you kind of that same targeting for whatever groove you've tried to record that wasn't quite as good. And so you could take the shuffle from Rosanna, played by Jeff Porcaro, and you could try to do a similar shuffle, and you could map out their groove, and you could apply it to yours at any tempo, and it would try to move your hi-hats and your ghost notes and all that to match the same kind of unique thing. But the 3 we are going to be using, clip separation, clip conform, and edit smoothing. As we talk through editing, we always talk through the steps of editing. So we have 4 steps: analyze, quantize, clean up. I should have gone with scrutinize. It would have been so much better. And then finalize. Analyze would be examining the actual performances and finding where everything is, like learning what was done. Then quantizing involves taking that performance and moving it towards your destination. Then cleanup or scrutinizing is really like quality control. You're checking your work, making sure everything did what it was supposed to do, and also that you're not creating glitches and artifacts that you don't want to hear. So it's very possible to create little crossfade glitches or digital effects that show up that would be very distracting for somebody. And then we're going to finalize at the end of this process so that when it goes time to mix, you're not dealing with a bunch of extra stuff. You hit play and you start EQing. So finalizing while you're in school is maybe not a great idea until you've had your instructor go over everything with you. You want to be checking out every hit, every note, and making sure you're not missing any mistakes. And maybe somebody else could help you out with that before you decide to finalize. It's much easier to fix a mistake before you finalize whatever editing task you're doing. So, clip separation is part of the analyze, step 1. Clip separation is going to look at the selection you give it, and it's going to analyze your drums and try to find where the transients are, where the hits are. Then when we go to clip quantize, step 2, that'll be conform. Clip conform and quantize kind of mean the same thing. And we'll be taking your selection and adjusting how aggressively we want to move that towards the grid. And then edit smoothing is part of our cleanup stage. We'll fill up any spaces, we'll put crossfades in, and then we are going to scrutinize and listen to all of it, look at all of it closely, and make sure that we don't have any mistakes in there. So here is step 1, analyze. Beat Detective works only within a certain selection, and it needs to be exact. Notice that it says start bar and beat, bar 2, beat 1. But my Pro Tools up here is not bar 2, beat 1. It's bar 2, beat 4, tick 707. So something else. So we're going to have to make a selection first, and then I'm going to have to teach it to to Beat Detective. So what I'm going to do is generally work in about thirds. It kind of depends on the type of song you're working with, how intense it is. I might jump in here to the measure before and go up until verse 1. You can use grid mode for that. I'm in slip mode, but if you hold command, it snaps to the grid. So that's what I did, is I just used slip mode and held command, and I'm holding shift to modify my selection. So shift and command is locking me down. Now you can see 9 zeros right here. This is really important, and you're going to use this shortcut a lot. The / over on the number pad next to the asterisk and equal and above 9. This puts you in the selection counter because we're going to lose this selection sometimes, and I need to be able to get it back. And these 9 zeros are really important as well. Notice down below it's only bar 2, beat 1, and no extra box here. So if you have extra stuff here, it's likely to screw up down here because it's going to be pulling to the wrong direction. So if I hit capture selection down here, it will learn bar 2 to 39, bar 2 to beat bar 39. Most songs are in 4/4, so you don't normally have to worry about that, but not all. And then it says contains 16th note, 8th note, quarter note, whatever. So what I'm going to do is go figure out what it contains. I can see where those hits are, and I can see where my grid lines are. My grid line is here, 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 here. And I have hits there. So like there's a snare hit, there's a kick hit. And my grid is set to 8th notes, so that means those 2 notes are an 8th note away. Do I have anything closer than those is the question. So I'm going to scroll through real quick, see if I can find anything closer together than a 16th note. Bigga, 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 bigga. 1 iana, 2 iana. So there are things closer than that. Those are 16th notes. The question is always going to be, I could always go smaller to like a 32nd note, but this is such a small grid line that when the drummer is rushing or dragging, which they would never do, but if they're a little bit out of pocket, let me find a spot where they are. Right here. Beat Detective is not very clever. It's very fast at what it does, but it doesn't have the ability to analyze things like you do. So you can tell this is bar 3 I'm sorry, bar 23, beat 3 right here. And this is a 30-second note to the left of that. Is it likely that there was a snare hit a 30-second note before beat 3, or is it more likely that the snare is hitting on beats 1 and beat 3, just like most songs do? So because this hit was early, it's actually closer to this 30-second note, and so Pro Tools would pull it the wrong way. Beat Detective would pull it the wrong way. But if I change my grid to a 16th note, which way is that note going to go? It's definitely going to the closest grid line, which is the correct one. So at a 16th note, unless he's really far out of time, I should be okay. But he does get fairly out of time a couple of times, like that kick hit right there. Looks like it's still going to pull the right direction, but I can't guarantee it. So if I really want to be foolproof, I might go to 8th notes here, so all the notes will get pulled the right direction. I'm going to change this back to 8th notes. And then every now and then there might be a few 30-second notes in my drum performance, and if I need to, I can just manually adjust those. All right, so my selection was bar 2 to bar 39. So / over on the number pad, 2 / 39, enter. That made my selection, and remember Q and W center that up. All right, so now Pro Tools knows what we're working with here. That 3, by the way, is a triplet. So if you have something with a triplet feel, that would be what you need to select. All right, so then it comes to detection. It needs to know where all the hits are, and it's already got a bunch of purple lines up here, but we would click Analyze, and it will study. It looks like it didn't change much, so it already had pretty much the analysis it needed. But there's a trick to this. Beat Detective group was just our close mics with all the transients. So if I click the dot to the left of that, now I'm only selected on those mics and not these others. And so if I analyze just those, you'll notice that a few of the things will move and be slightly better. Oops, I lost my selection, 2 to 39. Go back to BD, analyze. And the reason for that is, I didn't show you this earlier, when the tracks are big, you can see it more easily, but the room mics are going to be delayed. The original snare track is right here, but the room mic is way over here, and the overheads are back a little bit. Here are the overheads. They're delayed a little. Room mics, bigger room mics. So that delay can really screw with your ability to accurately place the transient right on the beat. /2 / 39, enter. So when I analyze, I will only select the close mics. I screwed up my zoom settings. Here we go. Make all the drums mini. Shift option, fit to window. So there we go. I analyzed the close mics, and then I'll go ahead and just click the dot to the left of drums so that all of my drums are selected. So essentially what I said was find my transients from the close mics. Now we're going to work on the rest of the kit. And from there, I need to be smarter than the computer. So that was its best guess. You can see a few options in here. If you only do bars, it will only do beat 1. If you do beats, it'll give you 4 of them, 4 quarter notes, 4 beats. And if you do sub beats, it'll do whatever you selected over here, 8th notes, 16ths. So that's typically what we'll do. And then trigger pad is, well, let me come back to that in 1 second. We are going to adjust the sensitivity to try to get a purple line on every drum hit. If you go higher, you'll get more, but eventually you'll get some that don't belong. Like this, there's nothing happening right here. So I went too high with my sensitivity, and it found probably some noise on a cymbal or something like that and identified it as a transient. So I'm going to lower my sensitivity, and I usually do this kind of zoomed out a little bit so I can see what's happening around different areas. And I'm looking to get rid of any weird little close double lines. And it looks like I have gotten pretty clean. But your sensitivity is going to be different every day depending on how hard they hit and gain staging and all that. It will do better or worse. Okay, so we're coming back to trigger pad because when I hit this button here, let me put this to 0. When I hit the next step is going to be to separate. And when you separate, it breaks all of these clips into unique clips. And once they're broken, you can move them. You can't move a kick transient around unless it's separated from the things next to it. So the problem is we have a lot of stuff where those purple lines might slightly overlap with the edge of the thing. And we'll have things like a flam where two instruments or two drums might get hit at the same time, like a kick and a hi-hat in this case. So you can see that the hi-hat starts over here, but the kick didn't start until right there. And so when it moves this, we're going to leave a little gap, and you can hear that hi-hat go tss, a little double up sound. So we solve that problem by using trigger pad. And the trigger pad is going to be a space before the transient. So let's make a big one. Let's do 30 milliseconds and separate. Notice how they all now broke over to the left. So as I move this kick, I'm also moving the hi-hat that was attached to along with it. /2/39. Lost my selection again. That was too big, so let's see about 10. 10 milliseconds is a pretty good trigger pad, typically. If you've got somebody that does a lot of flamming between their foot and their hand, especially like kick and snare, you may have to go to 15 milliseconds, but anything beyond that, and the tracks are probably not going to be all that salvageable. So there we go. And now I'm going to just scroll through and make sure that all of those were done. It's actually better to do it before you separate, so I'm going to undo. I just was eager to explain trigger pad. You can see these here. Listen to what that is. It's an open hi-hat, so you lifted up the pedal, let the hi-hat ring for a second, and then stomped on the pedal to close it. So he's not hitting it with a stick here. It's actually closing by itself, most likely. /2/39. So I probably don't need that to be exactly in time, but if I needed it to, I could control click and add my own transient. Control click, add my own. It didn't recognize because there was no stick hit, but if I decide that I need it to be in time, which is a reasonable assessment, then I would control click it. And I'm looking for two things, missing notes or extra notes. So as I go, I'm kind of keeping an eye on the waveforms up and down all these tracks and making sure everything's been caught. Here's one, missed it, got it. There's a little something. What is it? It's a hi-hat, really tight, 2/39. So let's catch it, because it sounds a little bit out of time. All right, here we go. There's an extra. Nobody did anything. Go away. Option click to get rid of them. So I'm holding control when I'm adding them and option when I'm removing them. All right, here's an interesting conundrum. These two instruments are hitting at the same time, but not lined up. There's a tom and a snare, and they're flaming. Anytime you hit two drums slightly offset, it's called a flam. And he's doing it on purpose. So there's a couple things you can do to kind of figure out which of these two hits, the tom or the snare, should get the purple line. Because I could move it here, and then the snare would be in time. Or I could move it here, and the tom would be in time, and the snare would be late. So one thing I can do is, if the drummer sounds and feels good, I can kind of trust them to have done it right. And if you notice, this kick is just barely ahead of the grid line. This one is a little more ahead. This one, the tom is a little bit ahead, and this kick is a little bit ahead. So that tells me the drummer was playing well, but just rushing slightly. So whichever one is ahead is probably the correct one. So the tom should be getting the purple line, and the snare is not, because the tom is going to pull to the right, just like these two kicks. These three kicks are all going to pull a little bit to the right. Other times you may prioritize based on what's going to be audible. Like if it's a hi-hat versus a snare drum, it may not be very obvious if the hi-hat is a little bit early or a little bit late, but it'd be more obvious if the snare drum is early or late. So there is that. Now, I've checked all my analysis, so it's time to separate. Remember, analyze, quantize, clean up. So that was analyzed. Now I'm going to quantize. Go to clip conform, and we have 3 different boxes here. The first one is strength, and the strength dictates how far it's going to pull towards the grid line. This guy right here is, let me change my counter, is 34 milliseconds rushed, which is a noticeable amount. I think most people can notice something inside of 10, but barely, if you're listening really carefully. But if a drummer is generally within 20 milliseconds and you're just listening to like a rock track where everybody's kind of playing live and real instruments, inside of 20 is usually feels like nobody made a mistake. If you get it inside of 10, it feels like everybody is somehow really crushing it because their timing is all lining up and the guitar transient and the snare transient are working together. So depending on the vibe of the track, I go to different lengths to make the drums more accurate. If they are, if the drummer is playing on a pop song against program drums, like there's a trap beat going on and live drums, I'm probably going to make the drums pretty much dead on. And I'll set the strength, either just turn it off, which is 100% if you do that, or I'll set it up to 100% or maybe 95% if I want to leave a little sloppiness for whatever reason. But if they're a good drummer and it's a kind of live band feel, I might leave them 20 milliseconds or even 15 milliseconds of wiggle room to be wrong. And so this guy up here at 34 milliseconds or whatever that was, if I set this strength to 50%, it will get halfway there. So let's call it 30 milliseconds becomes 15 milliseconds. And then he'd only be out by 15. If I go to 75%, he'll be well inside of that to like the 10 millisecond kind of range. And so that's probably what I'm going to do for this track. /2/39. I forgot the number, but it's okay because it's right there. It's all visible to us at all the time. So let's take it into like 70%, 75%, somewhere in there. And again, I do this differently for every track. If I want somebody to know I've been there and I want to stamp it as like this is perfect drums to the grid, these are robotic, then I'll go to 100. Most of the time I want it to be subtle and I don't want you to know that I was ever doing anything. So I'll keep it low. Exclude within, you can generally get away with not doing that, but essentially that's good enough. Exclude anything within a certain percentage. So I might find a hit in here if I'm going to use that. I'll say, okay, where were you playing good enough that I don't want it to touch anything? Like I want it to leave it alone. So this hit right here is, I can measure by going like this. And that was, if I did it right, yeah, about 6 milliseconds of out of time. So I'm totally fine with leaving that one alone. So let's do a little experiment. If I exclude within 3%, watch that hit right there and see if it moves. It did move. Undo. Now I'm going to try excluding 11%. Nope, it did not move. So now I'll go lower. This is just trial and error. 9% didn't move. 7% did move. 8% did not. So let's call it 8%. And then anything that's this close or closer won't move at all. And so I have the choice of ignoring anything that's within about 6 or 7 milliseconds and then it's going to only pull the others by 74%. Take them 3/4 of the way to the grid. Then we get to swing. Swing is basically a triplet, or playing around with this idea of something other than a straight beat. So a swung beat is typically triplets, and remember, triplets are 3 notes in the space of 2. So it would have been 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. It's 1 triple, 2 triple, 3 triple, 4 triple, 3 3 3 3 3 3 3 3 3 3 3 3. And so you'll have a lot of tracks that have that kind of pattern. And if you were to leave out the second one, you get bop, 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 bop. And you'll hear a ton of songs that have boom, ka, boom, ka, on guitar or drums or all of the above. And if you're at 100% swing, that's a triplet note. It puts you right on that triplet, divided by 3. If you go a little above that, it's going to actually place you later. And so instead of bop, 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 it's going to go bop, 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 bop. Those last 2 hits will be really close together because the third of the way down division has now scooted to the right. And if you do less than 100%, it's going to be somewhere in between the 1 and 2 and the 1 triple 2. So this would be less than a triplet and later than a straight beat. And I know that's all rather confusing, but we will just, you got to practice it. You find something with a triplet and try it out and experiment. This song does not have a triplet feel at all, so we're going to leave that off because I don't need any of it. Then it's time. I have analyzed all those. I've separated all those. Now I'm going to quantize or conform. And as I do that, you'll see all these little gaps open up. If I hit undo, this is the original placement for everybody. And then redo, everybody moves back towards the grid. And you'll see certain hits move further than others. And if they do that, it's going to leave a little gap because there's nothing to fill that space yet. So what I'm looking for at this stage, as I'm kind of doing my quality control check, is make sure everybody moved to the right spot and nobody opened up any weirdly large gaps. That some of these feel like a little bit larger of a gap, but that's okay. They're not moving like more than an 8th note or a full 16th note over or something like that. And I usually just do a quick scroll through. And let's listen to this because you can see there's a few big gaps in a row. Hear those gaps in there? That's okay because we're going to fix that in a second. All right, get my selection back, /2/39, enter. Next step is step number 3, cleanup. So we're going to go to edit smoothing. And it only has 2 options here, fill gaps or fill in crossfade, which is what we want to do. There's a crossfade length that lets you choose how long that fade is going to be. And I typically will do about the same as my trigger pad. If I did a 10 millisecond trigger pad, I'll just do a 10 millisecond crossfade length. Now watch closely as it fills these gaps. I'm going to do this one without the crossfade first so you can see. But see which direction it fills from? The right side pulls over towards the left to fill that gap. So this is not creating any new audio. It's just exposing a little bit of the old audio. Because if you take the beginning of any of these and drag it out, you'll see the original performance in its original timing. So what it's doing is taking this one and dragging just a little bit to fill that space. Drag this one a little bit to fill that space. /2/39. Then let's go to fill and crossfade. And it's going to do that same thing, but it's also going to fill the gap and leave the fade to the left of wherever that joint was. It's called a, if you pull up the batch fades with Command F, you'd see pre-splice centered or post-splice fades. These are pre-splice. And the reason for that is to the right of your fade is another transient. And if you go this way, you might end up exposing, let me find one that's kind of close. You end up exposing like 2 transients over that same space. So that was the edit for the first 39 bars. So let's listen and check. Usually you want to be zoomed in so you can see each of these hits and see the space between the hit and the fade. If you're not watching, you'll probably miss some little bump in here, but we're really checking for two things. We're looking for missing transients, and here's an example of a missing transient. There. If it did something like that, you would kind of hear it, but it's harder to hear, but it's easy to see. And so you would want to make sure you don't have any missing transients. And then the other thing you're watching out for is double transients, where you hear the same hit twice, like this. Here I went front bump. So we're looking for missing transients, double transients, or anything that's just out of time. So now we overran our selection, and we will continue on. So I'm going to run this again, but I'm going to run this more like real time, and I'll just talk as I go. I need a selection that starts where I just landed, take another third of the song. If there's a gap in the song, it's a great time to put a end of a selection, because that fade, you don't necessarily want it to be in the middle of a section. So Command-8 to get this back. Start over with clip separation. Remember, the first two you're going to ignore. Clip separation, capture selection. My selection was not exact, so 39 exactly. 39 to 93. Now those two match. So always double check that these two match. 39 to 93 needs to be up there as well. Then I'm going to analyze, but I only want to analyze the close mics. So I hit the dot to the left of the BD group and hit analyze. And once it's done, hit the dot to the left of the drum group, and I've selected now all of my drums. This first hit is always going to get a little wonky when you select in the middle like that, but just ignore it. It's okay. And where did all these come from? I guess I just need to lower my sensitivity because it's grabbing something from somewhere. And again, I will scroll through, check my purple lines against the waveforms that I can see. There's a couple of hi-hat. They're little swells on the hi-hat track, but that's what it looks like when you play with open hi-hats that don't have a strong click. Okay, here's that 30-second note drum fill, and I just need to make sure that I'm not trying to edit anything in between my eighth note grid lines. So I can see 4 hits. There's 1, 2, 3. That one's kind of hard to see, 4. But it's that middle one that's going to pull to the right to this grid line here. And then same on this, it's the middle one. Because there's 2 notes in between the eighth notes that if I need to, I'll edit them by hand later. Keep on going. I'm going faster than you probably should, but this doesn't need to, this is a tool meant to speed you up. So once you get comfortable with it and you start running tracks, you'll start to realize when you can speed up and when you have to slow down and make sure you're getting it right. Some little hi-hats in there. Probably these would have grabbed if I had my sensitivity up, but I was getting extras. So sometimes you have to just kind of pick and choose whether you want to delete a few or add a few because you can't get the sensitivity perfect. All right, so there's something going on here. that's not lining up. That goes on the 8th note. That goes on the 8th note. But he's playing a 16th or a 32nd note. I guess it's a 16th note kick and fills over here. So I'm just making sure I'm grabbing all the ones that are on the grid lines. Those super tiny little 16th notes are all going to move with the note right before them. So most likely, if the note before them is late, the next one will be late as well. So that generally just kind of works to only do the 8ths, even if they're playing 16th note drum fills. All right, so I've checked all of that. I don't need to change any of my settings. Like trigger pad is the same. My quantize is the same. The only exception would be if the drummer changes from like a straight beat to a triplet beat. Once I quantize, I'll just kind of scroll back, a little cruise in the neighborhood, and make sure nothing went the wrong direction. If you see any big gaps, it would look something like that, like an extraordinarily large space, but these little guys are all fine. All right, then now is a good time to fix that first note, and I'm just going to peel back so I've got it, drag it to be in time, and then I hit W to go to the right side of it, you know, because Q and W take you to the left and right edge, and make sure I didn't, when I drug it to the right, I want to make sure I didn't cover this one up, so I use my trim tool to just make sure they're all uncovered. And then slash, what was my selection? 39 to 93. And it's okay to shift click because the next step is to create fades, and they don't need to be exactly on the grid. You know, like your selection doesn't need to exactly match this Beat Detective selection. And hit smooth. It will fill all those. And again, zoom in to where you can see the space between your hit and your fade. And if your screen doesn't zoom or scroll with you, this will be really hard to keep your eyes on it. So make sure your options, edit window scrolling is on page. Don't zoom in so far that it flashes like crazy like this. And don't zoom out so far that you can't see if there's a little tiny glitch in the audio. That was that 16th note fill, and that all sounded good to me, so I'm not going to go any tighter than that. While we're doing this, I'm going to say Beat Detective and editing tracks is going to be really frustrating to some of you because it's kind of outside of what you were expecting to do. It's outside of what you're comfortable doing, and it's a little trickier. But once you get the hang of it, I would say this is one of the better things you can be doing as a new engineer, because it gives you a lot more options in terms of, I'm going to take this all the way up to that break, because then it goes into that blast beat thing, and that's going to change. It gives you a lot of career options as you get started. Most, new engineers aren't starting out mixing records. They're starting out interning or assisting on records. I captured selection, go to my close mics and analyze. And if you start out assisting on records, you want to be trusted to do more than that. And so your goal should be to impress everybody and to make yourself really valuable to the producer or engineer you're assisting for. And then they'll want to bring you into their next session and their next session. And editing is one of those things that they are probably not going to have time to do in the middle of a busy day or a busy session. And so if you can grab the hard drive, pull up your laptop or jump over to another computer, and then in a few minutes come back with edited drums that they can track their band along with, that makes you really valuable. And as a freelancer, there's opportunity to be made just editing tracks for other people. sites like Fiverr and SoundBetter will help you kind of connect with people that are willing to pay for it. Some of them pay a fair amount, some pay an unfairly cheap amount, but those are great opportunities to screw up. If you're not very good, take some of the cheap ones and get better, and then you can start demanding to be paid more. Here's some flams. And again, kicks are all kind of coming in early. So I'm going to let the transient rest on that first one and let the second hit be the one that's going to end up getting pushed a little bit late. And I do this waveform zoom a lot. Shift option scroll wheel. Very, very helpful when you get in and out of small, quiet spaces. Saves you a lot of time being able to just like accurately pop the waveform up, find exactly what you're looking for, and then sync it back down to a useful height. All right, analysis is good. Separate. Clip conform. Boom. On the editing side of things, I edited this track for $50 an hour for the original. I did it faster than we are right now, and I wasn't talking to somebody the whole way through it. But, I think I edited the whole song in just a little bit longer than this video is taking us. Okay, those all look good. Now it's time to move on from quantize to clean up and smooth that out. All right, so this one had a weird thing where it was a long sustained hit. So I only want one fade in there. So what I'm going to do is drag this one that was breaking here, drag it all the way up and over this next hit, then drag it back until you can see that one, and then put a tiny little fade, just like the drum fades, about the same size. That way you're only going to hear one edit, and it's in the least likely place to hear it. You'll also learn a lot about drummers, drumming, drum parts, and you start to hear timing better when you do this stuff. And it can be a little tedious, admittedly. Okay, let's see. That cymbal stopped right about there, so I'm just going to break it. Actually, I'm going to hit S to trim off the right edge, and then G to do a fade out. I'm not trying to get rid of any cymbals. I'm going to let it ring its full length. But I also don't need any extra noise here. And then I'll make sure my fade in for the next thing is clean. Oh, I was going to say, editing can feel a little bit tedious and kind of frustrating, especially when you're fresh at it, because it's a lot of new concepts. But once you get good at it and get comfortable with it, it's a really nice change of pace sometimes. All right, we made our next selection. It's a really nice change of pace from the creative fatigue you're going to get in a tracking session or mixing sessions, because, when your brain is going through uncertain waters, like creating a song or trying to figure out how to do a mix or whatever the thing is, it can be very tiring to spend all day not knowing if you're doing a good job, but thinking you are, but maybe you're not. Editing is one of those things where it's like everything is easy. It's foolproof. It either is in time or it's not in time. I can hear the edit or I can't hear the edit, and it's very just technical. And so for a lot of people, it's a great little mind de-stressor or mind wipe to kind of, let's just do something vegetative for a little while, like edit drums. So I really enjoy the kind of contrast back and forth between the creative side of thing, like producing this song, and the technical side of things, like editing it. All right, capture selection. Notice I went all the way past the track because I don't want any fades in the middle of that last cymbal hit. And 151 to 174, those match. I've got my close mics, so I'm going to analyze. And then I can reselect the rest of my tracks. And this definitely goes into 16th notes because it's boop dat, boop dat, boop bat, boop dat. So I'm gonna go ahead and change this to 16ths because there's gonna be a lot of these kick hits in between the 8th note. And hopefully he stays close enough in time to not have any glitches with Beat Detective. All right. These are all looking good so far. This is getting close, getting out ahead of it. We'll see how he holds up. If it starts pulling the wrong direction, I have a couple ways to fix that. So I kind of hope it does. And if not, I'll try to explain it anyway. All right. So those are all analyzed. Now we separate and conform. And that's a really big pull. So let's listen to that. Woo! Okay, so it definitely did screw that up. And you can tell it used to be here, and these were early. They were very early. And when it beat detected, it pulled them to the closest grid line, which was these two went left, while this one went right. Same thing. These three went left, I guess. And the others around it were going right, and then it happened again over here. So what I'm going to do is, I don't need to get rid of my broken pieces. I just need to get them closer to being in time. So I'm going to grab where they started getting out of time until they start getting back into time. Something like that. And I'm going to nudge it to the right. This is comma and period. And that nudge value goes by this amount. So if I just nudge that to the right, a couple of clicks, they'll be closer, and then it's not going to glitch on me. So I can just go 151 to 174. And now when I hit conform, they'll all go to the correct side. There's that one gap there, but that's okay because they're all moving in the same direction. Looks like I had another problem over here where these guys were all doing it. So let's take the ending of the song and just pull it to the right. And I'm just hitting undo to get back to kind of before I did the edit. 151 to 174, conform. Nice and clean. That's that same section that looked pretty bad a second ago. Now it's all cleaned up. If you know your drummer rushed the whole song, it's totally legit before you start beat detecting. Just grab the entire track and nudge it to the right. More often than not, it's to the right because that's just how drummers work. Okay. Select all the rest of this, edit smoothing, do my fades. We did it. And then again, I'm going to wait for those cymbals to die, and then I'll create a fade starting there and going for another couple seconds. So you won't hear that. And that is Beat Detective. I'd probably, if I was really concerned about it, which on a track that I'm being paid for, I am, I would go in and listen one more time from the very top, since I kind of did it in sections. And then the other thing to watch out for is make sure that you fix the notes at the beginning of each of your selections. So like for this last selection, I went from 151. And you saw me do it, I just didn't talk about it, where I manually went in and cleaned up this fade to be not on top of some of these hits. And the one before that was like 74 or something. and I would jump there, wherever that hit was, 73 maybe, and make sure that that fade wasn't all funky. I didn't want 2 edits. I didn't want anything covered up. Just make sure I have a nice clean edit. And the best way to clean these up is just grab one side, peel it over one way, grab the other side, peel it back, and then draw in your fade. After you've done all your checking and you feel really confident in it, it is time for the last step, finalize. So to finalize the drum edit, it's already done and it should play through fine. But if you hand off a track like this to a mix engineer, they're going to be a little frustrated with that because you just can't see it. It looks very artificial. So what I'm going to do is just take all of these and duplicate my playlist one more time because I want to make sure that I'm not taking away my opportunity to fix my own mistakes, which I will, still find my own mistakes later when I'm trying to mix or something. So I'm going to duplicate it, do a batch rename. This time I'm going to replace 01 with consolidated, C-O-N-S. So BD consolidated. That's Beat Detective consolidated. And then in Beat Detective to consolidate, you just Command A to select all, and then Option Shift 3. And it will render out new clips for each track, starting and ending at the right spot. And it's going to put that name on it, that bd.consolidated will become part of the audio file name. I hope that helps, and I know that was a lot. I'm going to make another video that's the real quick version, and this will be the full explanation of everything. And I will see you soon.